Okay, in three,
Let's go.
2, 1. Welcome back to Beyond the Headset. I'm your co-host Rick. This is your other co-host Jones, and we're going to
going on?
continue discussing all things AR, VR, Web3, AI, future tech, and whatnot. So we got some news stories today and some other topics. Anything
it's
else?
been an exciting week. No, I'm excited to dive into it. We're filming this session in the morning, so we just had our coffee. We're
High
kinda buzzing.
energy.
Should be a good
Buzzing.
one. Yeah, it should be a good one. All right, cool. I got the timer up. If you want to kick off your first 10-minute segment on the news.
Yes, let's start with some doom and gloom.
Oh,
Metaverse doom and gloom. It's a survey, the 2023 State of the Game Industry Survey, which canvasses over 2,300 game developers and just asked them on various topics about the games industry.
wow.
And I think the question I want to talk about was they were talking about the metaverse. They were questioning all these game developers on it. And they asked them which company is like most poised to deliver on the promise of the metaverse. And so you got Epic Games with Fortnite at 14%, Meta Horizons at 7%, Microsoft with Minecraft at 7%, and then there's like Roblox and Google and VR Chat was in there too. But all those percentages, the top one I just mentioned was 14%. At 33%, there was the answer none. The metaverse concept will never deliver on its promise. No, actually, wrong. 33% was last year. 45% said the metaverse will never deliver on its promise. So almost half of the game developers who were questioned about this said, nope, metaverse not going to happen. And there's a myriad of reasons. They didn't get too much additional information, but they got a few like responses from game developers. So I'll look at a few of them that.
Please read some.
The
Also,
first
before
go.
we do that, in terms of the metaverse, what was promised is that like the MMO game that we were talking about, or what does that entail?
No clarification. I think the issue. Well, okay. So one of the quotes is, the article. This is an IGN article discussing it, but it's talking about how part of it is no one actually knows what the metaverse is, which I think is still true to this day. There's no clear definition for what it's supposed to be. So some of the respondents focused on the metaverse as a VR experience, in which case VR has a lot of issues that the game developers harped on, be it levels of interactivity, affordability is a big one, control standardization. It's just so new. The control schemes for everything are all over the place. Hardware quality is an issue. Like I said, there is an issue of no one actually understands what the metaverse is supposed to even be. Mm-hmm. Is it a 3D space where all video games are interconnected somehow? Another one just talks about how the metaverse already kind of exists and the people trying to sell it really don't even know what it is, and neither do consumers, but they're just trying to sell something that already exists.
Yeah.
Just doing a quick read through to see if there's anything else.
Well, as you're reading through, I guess that brought to mind, because when I asked that question about what is the metaverse, what are people even responding to here? It does feel like that is one of the key issues here. Is like, what the hell even is that? Like, everyone has so many different interpretations of it. When I used to talk about the metaverse, I would say it was Twitter or Discord. It was just like spending time online, which I did actually, and I do kind of still feel that. It's just like kind of online, but then now there's all this VR stuff, and now I don't know. It's so hard to piece out like what the hell that even is.
I guess it's crazy because Meta is just the champion of the concept of metaverse, and I don't even think they have a clear vision internally of what the metaverse is. Like, it just, I don't know. Is it solely in VR? That just doesn't seem. It seems like it has to at least be some sort of 3D space. Otherwise, we're just talking about the internet. If it's just Discord and Twitter, then yeah, it already exists, and it's just Web 2 or whatever you want to call it. If it's 3D spaces, well, that kind of already exists. VR chat is the metaverse. Like, you have all
True.
these interconnected worlds, and it's a social space, and you can be whatever you want. There's a lot of Fortnite could be a metaverse. Like, it that already exists. So I feel like the metaverse, out of necessity, if it is something that doesn't already exist, it's some sort of standard system where I can be in one 3D world, and then you know how you drop portals in VR chat?
Yeah.
I'm imagining that like every game has some sort of portal system where if you and your friends are playing Fortnite, you're in the game in 3D. I don't think it necessarily has to be in VR. I don't see why the metaverse has to be experienced through VR, but you drop down a portal, you walk through the portal into Halo or something. That
So
seems
would
like
that do is that interoperable with all your assets or
I
totally different
think
experiences?
I don't know. I don't see the interoperability thing ever happening fully. I see it happening maybe Fortnite and Minecraft will partner up and you'll be able to trade assets between them, but like there's no reason
Well, because
for
I guess in that vision, like when you play Xbox and you are playing Call of Duty and then you exit out and open up another game, is that essentially? It's basically like the Portal thing you just said, except
yeah, it seems like it would have to be more like seamless, like you stay in the game and your character in the game walks through a portal into I don't know. There's just the concept of the metaverse still just even that definition seems wishy-washy and like not a good solid foundation for what needs to be done to make it happen. And
yeah,
so I do think it's not surprising. I mean, 50% is a high amount, but I think that also the whole meta blowing it in the last year has turned a lot of game developers off of the
yeah.
concept of the
You also
metaverse.
it also kind of makes you think about what is even the reasoning for a survey like this. If no one has any idea about what the hell the metaverse is or where it's going to be, what is even the point of this? It seems like from what we talked about last week that a thesis of the future is going to progress more and more digital. How the hell that looks, no one really knows. Seems a bit more tangible than speculating about this metaverse concept, having people respond to a survey, yes or no, about something they don't even know. Like, what the hell?
Well, I think that's kind of illuminating. At least maybe the question could have been worded better, but the fact that it's just such a even game developers who I think if it is 3D worlds, they would make the foundation of the people building out the metaverse or whatever it is. The fact that they don't even know. And again, the fact that I don't even think Meta knows, or at least they have a vision, a weird vision for it. I don't know. It's just not.
Well, actually, that is interesting for the game developers. It's interesting that there's more negative this year than last year, and I would be curious for those people who responded what specifically their vision is. Because if it is VR, like you said, that would be really interesting. Telling that, oh, it seems like the VR vision is just a lot. There's a lot less confidence in it. Or if they were talking about AR, or who knows. But yeah, that would be really interesting to see. Maybe they could send out a more specific survey about. Like,
yeah, I'd be
more
interested
specific things
to.
about it.
I would love to hear what a lot of professional game developers think on like a more granular level. Like have each of them define it, and then talk about what they think they would need to make it happen. I'm also going to lob a grenade over your way.
Do it.
Because they in this survey they also asked them about blockchain.
Okay.
And I mean it's not too surprising, but I don't really understand how these percentages work. I think they might be different questions, but essentially they were asked about the developers' interest in blockchain and if they would implement it. And 75%, so 3/4 said they were not interested in blockchain at all. And then 56% were outright opposed to its use in video games. I think those are probably separate questions because obviously the math doesn't add up. But I don't think that's too shocking based on what I've heard from game developers in the past. But there is still definitely a lot of hostility towards it. And to an extent, I somewhat agree. I don't see right now the value of just throwing NFTs and blockchain into a game. It feels like it could be made something interesting down the line. But if a game just said, okay, now you can get these skins as NFTs, well, 90% of the people don't have wallets. They're not like integrated into the whole blockchain ecosystem. So it's like a confusing, annoying pain, and you don't really get much benefit because the company could technically do what Valve did and let you sell their items out not even using blockchain. So I think
Yeah.
there's, I don't know. I'd be curious about
Yeah.
your thoughts
Yeah.
on it.
So one, not shocked at all by those results. I feel like that's what you would gather just with the overall sentiment. Two, I would actually totally agree with you. Like, even though I'm so in on blockchain and NFTs, I think they'll be so fundamental for the future. I would not at all say that every game should adopt them, or like if you just threw them into some game that already exists, it would ultimately be good. I feel like most times it would be bad.
Yeah.
I think the key, but that doesn't shake or take away anything from the value I think they'll have moving forward when people do integrate them and adopt them. I think it's just like, I also think there will be a world where there are a lot of games that don't have them, and that will continue to persist. And then
Yeah,
there
I mean,
will also be games that do. So I guess my theory is just that I do think it allows for this vision of an open metaverse and digital property rights to exist when that needs to happen.
totally.
But, and because before that couldn't happen at all. So now you kind of get these two paths that you didn't have before: the digital property rights, the real asset value on the internet, and the just for fun stuff. Whereas previously you would just have the just for fun stuff. So I also
Yep.
don't necessarily think you should just take, property rights and real value and throw it into the just for fun stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I think especially too, even in the future, if it does become very integrated with games, there's still going to be like single player linear games where like there really isn't much of a use for, I mean, maybe if you want to sell it to someone else who's playing the game, but there are a lot of games where you don't even get to customize much anyway, so I don't even know what you would own.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
But
Actually,
multiplayer games.
Yeah.
That's
So that actually
def-
gets to my next comment. But real quick, I guess last thing on this, that's a fascinating report that you just brought in. The fact that 40% of game developers who are developing in this space don't have any idea what the hell they're shooting towards. That's pretty wild to think
Yeah.
about that big of a number. That's crazy.
I think part of it is they don't feel like they are working on the metaverse. They think they're working on gaming, and then the metaverse is this separate concept. So I don't even think,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like they're confused on what they're working on. They just think the metaverse is this other thing that it sounds like a lot of them think just won't happen. But
Yeah,
I don't
like,
know.
what does that mean? I guess that would be the question. Won't
Yeah.
happen. But okay, I guess so. Timer just went off. Let me do 10 minutes for mine. So my piece of news is two prominent projects in the NFT space this week announced that they are going cross-chain. Essentially, what that means is, you know how there are a bunch of blockchains like Solana, Ethereum, Arbitrum, whatever.
Yeah.
They're taking some parts of their collection or their collection and moving it to another chain, or allowing access for users to transport those NFTs to different chains. So let me go over the two big ones, and then we can talk about it, because I haven't totally thought through it, and I wanted to do that on this podcast with you to just hear your thoughts and figure out my thoughts. But first one was Doodles. So Doodles is kind of an OG. Love Doodles. Full disclosure, not financial advice. I have a Doodle. And basically they have their original collection, 10,000 PFP project collection, that is going to stay on Ethereum, but they're expanding into this Doodle 2 endeavor. And for that, they're not going to use Ethereum. They're going to use this blockchain called Flow. So Flow is interesting. I had not really heard much about it, except for, have you ever heard of NBA Top Shot
Yeah.
NFT collection? Okay. So that was one of the earliest, I guess, more mainstream NFT collections. It got a lot of people into the ecosystem. A lot of people, when you ask them when did they come in, a lot of people say NBA Top Shot. So that was on Flow, and Flow is similar to Polygon that we talked about before, where the gas fees are almost non-existent, and they have a lot of Web 2 onboarding rails, if that makes sense. You can use your credit card to purchase things, stuff like that. So for a brand like Doodles, where their vision is, they have these really kind of cute characters, and so their vision is to become this kind of mainstream Web 2 and Web 3 brand. And so this Doodles 2 collection is almost about your digital identity, and you're able to dress up your character. There's going to be like a whole marketplace for, accessories, stuff like that. And so they're going to Flow because, as an NFT project, their main thing isn't necessarily to be niche in Web 3. It's more about a cultural brand that transcends Web 3 or Web 2. And so for them, Flow's a good choice because it's cheap, because you can do a lot of stuff. It can onboard a lot of Web 2 people just based on their overarching brand. Second one is this one, Pudgy Penguins. Pudgy Penguins, just real quick, they had a wild redemption story. So they were low-key one of the OGs also. 10K PFP project, really cute kind of penguins. But the founder, I don't know exactly what happened. I think he just started blowing it or just didn't really want to put in the effort. So the community basically rallied together. This guy, Luca Netz, I believe, kind of rallied everyone. And they bought out the whole project, which was pretty cool.
Damn.
They bought it from the founder. So that was a cool kind of example of decentralized IP and incentivizing people to keep the brand going by actually buying out the whole collection and the contract to, to kind of run the whole thing. So they just announced they have a what is it even called? I guess like a secondary collection in their overarching collection called Little Pudgies. So they have Pudgy Penguins and Little Pudgies. Little Pudgies are now being able to be bridged to Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, and Arbitrum. Arbitrum's a layer 2. Their whole idea is very similar to Doodles, where they're a brand. They want to incorporate more of the Web 2 space. They just want to be everywhere. And so Polygon, Binance Smart Chain, and Arbitrum are all lower fees, more Web 2 onboarding rails. So that's kind of their mission too. And so I guess a few interesting things here. One, I think it is really interesting the difference between maybe what you normally think in crypto of like DeFi and decentralized finance compared to these NFT brands, where what they're really trying to be are just brands transcendent of Web3 or Web2. And so you see that with both of these moves where they're just trying to get as many Web2 people on, but also still utilize the blockchain aspect. I think that's really interesting. And then second, a few questions I have, which maybe we can start off the conversation.
Yep.
One is kind of...
Oh. Hang on.
Did you navigate backwards?
Yeah, I smacked the thing.
You're just too hyped to get into this conversation.
Yeah, I'm too stoked.
So, okay, one that I'm interested in is the bridging technical wise. We probably won't be able to have a very fruitful conversation on this because we won't really understand. So Doodles 2, the whole collection is just on Flow. So they're just on Flow. But for Pudgy Penguins, they have this whole bridge functionality where you can take your little Pudgy from Ethereum and bridge it to these other chains. So with that, it's kind of like, technically, how does that work? Because NFTs essentially are just a record of ownership. So I guess it gives you like the same record of owning the same asset on a different chain. But then if my Pudgy Penguin if my little Pudgy is now on Polygon, does my record of ownership still exist on Ethereum? Is that gone? What if I bridge it back? Does it reappear? Don't really know how that works. Second thing I think is we could maybe have a better discussion on is, so I understand from the perspective, let's just take Pudgy Penguins, for example. I understand from the perspective of we want to onboard more Web2 people. Let's make it easier for them to initially get into the ecosystem. So you can buy with a credit card. You see this cute penguin, I'll buy it, see what happens. But if I'm a holder of Little Pudgies, which I am, also not financial advice, what is my motive to send it to another chain? And I think that's just a higher level conversation of outside of collecting and kind of the community or like leveraging the commercial IP, but that's more honestly right now done in Web 2. What is the value of the experience on a specific blockchain? Like if I bridge my little Pudgy to Polygon, how does that differ than Ethereum when on Ethereum all I'm really doing is keeping it in my wallet and just letting it sit there and just being part of the community and kind of having it be an access pass. So I guess those are some things I'm not totally sure about, but were questions when I saw this. So yeah, I don't know. Any thoughts on, I guess, anywhere about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I also am very confused on, like, if you're already a holder, I don't know what switching to a different blockchain would do. However, like, I don't know, I guess it is easier to get into if you can enter it from multiple blockchains. That kind of gets to my issue of there's so many blockchains. This is so confusing. Yeah. Even what I was talking about earlier with, like, video games, if they introduced it, 90% of the people playing the game don't have a wallet. They don't have any of the necessary stuff, and it'd be confusing to them.
Yeah.
So if it somehow the scale of this increased and you could transfer it across a bunch of blockchains, it seems like it'd be useful. But yeah, I also, if I have it in Ethereum, why switch? Maybe fees?
Yeah, if you're...
I feel like it's fees... transactional exclusively, the benefits. I don't know.
So yes, when you're getting, if they have, so for Doodles, I understand, because for Doodles, the mechanism is, for the Doodles too, is there's going to be a lot of transactions, in air quotes, that you make with your character. You're changing out your your pants, your shirts, you're dressing up your character, you're doing different stuff, and so that's all on chain. So it basically lives on chain. So you need very low transaction fees for that. But for something like Little Pudgies, what interaction am I doing? Like, what transactions am I making? Right now on Ethereum, I'm just holding it in my wallet, and I use it to gate my access into the Discord. It's just fun being part of the community to see where it goes. But, and even honestly, like Azuki, like, I mean, well, actually, no. That's an example of them doing cool stuff where you get badges for being like collecting stuff on chain. You can be part of this Halumia experience that is more in the virtual world. But for these projects that don't have a lot of stuff outside of almost the Web 2 stuff, like Discord, Twitter, what is really the value of going? And I guess maybe it just sets them up in a better place moving forward. Yeah. If they do want to integrate more of these experiences, that there'll be lower fees. But the cross-chain thing's really interesting because I think I mentioned it in a prior podcast. DeGods are moving from Solana to Ethereum, and then one of the other collections is moving from Solana to Polygon. But it's interesting because in more of the DeFi space, most of the hacks that you see, like these $1 million hacks, a lot of them are from bridges, cross-chain bridges, where you try to send like ETH to Solana or wrapped ETH on a Solana. It's just a tough mechanism, it seems like. And so a lot of the hacks you see are actually from these cross-chain things. So I listen to, shout out Bankless, I think they're dope. They talk about just the crypto space every week. And they talk about how it seems like their vision is more single chain, where Ethereum becomes the settlement layer. You have these layer 2s on top of it, but you don't have to worry about sending things out, worrying about hacks. And so I was kind of in that mindset too. And then you start seeing all this cross-chain stuff, and it's interesting. I don't know. It continues to be this interesting thing where like we're just witnessing it as it all plays out, and no one really knows what the future's going to hold. And it's just interesting to observe.
Yeah, it's fun to watch. I feel like the developments are so fast. And as someone who, I'm not there yet on it, it's fun seeing the people in the Web3 space like solve all these different issues. And each time it's like, okay, that solves this issue I had as a non-Web3 person. That is like a barrier to entry to me.
True.
And it's still, I don't see myself getting super invested currently, but if they keep solving these things, people like me and people even more opposed, it becomes much more palatable and beneficial, it seems like. So yeah, I don't know, it's fun to watch.
That's a great point actually. It's such a UX problem right now, because Little Pudgies was talking about this world where, because Polygon works with Instagram, I think low-key Flow also is integrated with Instagram, so you could basically take out your credit card, buy a Pudgy Penguin or whatever on like through Instagram.
That name is like so funny. Just buying a Pudgy Penguin.
Oh my gosh,
it's like
it was
adorably
low
funny.
Pudgies, low Pudgies. It's pretty hilarious. It was part of this meta in the early days of NFTs where they were all like descriptors and then animal names. So you had like lazy lions, pudgy penguins, bored ape, so many of these. It was the classic meme.
Dude, I feel like when I was looking at all these NFT collections, it seemed like all but a few of the top ones were pretty much just like a reskinned copy of one of the big dogs.
Yeah.
There were, after Azuki came out, I remember seeing a bunch of like side profile anime things.
Yes.
And it's like,
yes. It's funny now, it's kind of dying down a little bit in the bear market, but that just awakened a memory I haven't thought about in a while. Where in the bull market, when everyone was making so much money, anytime a collection came out that did something a little bit different, you literally get like 10 derivative projects or things that took inspiration in the next like week. Like when Azuki came out, there were literally 10 projects, and they all would get, people would mint them because the hype was just so crazy.
Yeah.
And then they'd get rugged. The founders would just walk out with everything. So yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, cross-chain NFT projects, it was interesting, and we'll see kind of where that all goes. But that was my 10 minutes. So back to you.
Nice. Okay. My next story is more just general industry trends.
Okay.
It's like a bunch of mini trends in the gaming industry. It impacts VR, it impacts just all gaming, but it's a weird year because this year is a massive year for gaming with the kind of releases that are coming out. You have a really anticipated Spider-Man game. You have the new Zelda, which is the most anticipated, I would say. You got a Harry Potter game. You have a Star Wars. There's all these massive titles coming out this year, and it's a backlog from all these delayed titles from COVID. But simultaneously, there's the layoffs are not they're not dodging the layoffs. All these gaming and tech companies. So like Riot Games just went through a round of layoffs. Ubisoft laid off a bunch of people and canceled 3 projects. Ubisoft made the Assassin's Creed series.
Okay.
Microsoft, an interesting one, is they just laid off people at Bethesda, which is Skyrim, the upcoming Starfield game. That's one. Starfield is one of the big, most anticipated games this year too.
Gotcha.
Then Microsoft also laid off their whole mixed reality toolkit team, which is responsible for making all the software for like integrating Unity experience or using Unity to make a HoloLens experience, which is their headset. That one's interesting because Microsoft, they just re-upped this deal with the US government to make HoloLens headsets for the military, but they're just so, I don't know, Microsoft is dominating in the gaming and all this futuristic metaverse stuff, whatever you want to call it, everywhere besides AR VR. They're kind of taking a we'll wait and see approach.
Got you.
Yeah, I don't know. I just have a bunch of like random little stories. Nintendo, oh, to my prediction on the Nintendo next console,
Switch.
they will, there's a rumor that they're now negotiating with suppliers to get all the components for their next follow-up to the Switch. So I don't know. There's like big things happening in the industry, but also a lot of cutbacks, and it's interesting to see, especially in like the VR AR space. I think a lot of the hype has been lost, so they're not willing to invest in these long shots as much anymore, and they're more focusing on like the bread and butter, Nintendo's next handheld console, which was huge and is, that's another random fact from this little spree, but Nintendo's Switch is now most likely going to become the most sold console of all time, and it's handheld.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty
yeah, I don't know. Just kind of like general industry trends I thought were interesting.
Yeah. And I have a question on those because it is interesting. So would you say that the layoffs are more around kind of cutting departments that had more futuristic visions, or do the layoffs seem more of just general cuts based on operations and they're still doing the same output? Like for these games like Bethesda or whatever, did they just potentially overhire like some of these other companies and then they're still going to have the same output, but they're just now trimming their team and they're still going to be able to do what they do? Or is it more like you said, the cutting off more future vision departments? Or does it vary?
I think with Microsoft it seems like the future, like they're kind of cutting back. Here's another really sad story that kind of speaks to this. Back in the day, early VR days, someone made a mod for PC Halo where you could play Halo in VR. That person suddenly got hired by 343, which now owns the Halo IP.
Okay.
And it got leaked that they were working on a VR Halo, but they canceled it. So I think that's, Microsoft seems to be just kind of really scaling back in that area. I think these other companies I mentioned, I would guess it's more just trimming the fat kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. And just all the other tech companies are doing it, so they got to hop on, and I don't know, the writing's on the wall that we're potentially entering a recession. But yeah, Microsoft itself seems to be a little out on some of this future stuff.
Yeah, that is really interesting about... It will be interesting to see if it picks back up when the economy starts picking up. Like if it's very correlated with that, which makes sense. I mean, like focus on the core business operations, or if it's going to be something where it just kind of like,
I don't know,
never comes back.
It might. I don't know. The VR thing is an interesting one because I keep going back and forth on like eventually it'll get there, and then there's all these challenges they have to solve for it to be interesting, software, hardware. That I'm like, I don't know, maybe Microsoft just stays in their lane and they focus on cloud gaming and traditional 2D games. And I think a big determinant on the next 5 to 10 years in VR and AR is the Apple headset this year, how it's received. Because that's like the one thing people are really, really hyped for. And things can change. Like if Microsoft actually had pushed through and dropped Halo for VR, I think that would have been very game changing for VR in general, if it was a good game. I think there's just no major titles in VR that drive serious interest. There are really good games. There's Beat Saber, there's VR Chat, there's a Walking Dead game, but like another one, Epic Games, Tim Sweeney posted a huge Twitter thread about how he has no plans to bring Fortnite to VR. And then I always, when I see these articles about huge games not coming to VR, I'm like, but what if they did? Like, how massive would that have been for VR?
I have a question for you. How massive do you think it would have been? I guess the skew on that question is it possible to have as good of an experience as you have Fortnite with the controller in a VR experience, or is it just not ready yet?
Well, that was Tim's, and I think the reason they canceled the Halo thing, but Tim Sweeney saying no to Fortnite on like the Quest, his thesis is no, it would be massively inferior. It might drive some headset sales, but right now we just have the issue of people buying headsets, using them, thinking it's cool, and then they get put in the closet for the rest of their life. So yeah, I think it could be massive for VR, but it could only be a spike. I would predict it would like spike sales of headsets. The game would do pretty well. It'd be the best, most played game in VR, but it would die down because the hardware and the software just isn't there yet to support something like that. And I guess I don't know if it will be as enjoyable. I kind of assume that if we're going to be using these headsets to game a lot, it's going to be me sitting down in a virtual movie theater and playing like a traditional Halo game on a big screen or on a beach in Hawaii or something ridiculous. But
yeah,
I don't know.
Dude, I just had a wild thought. I think it's just interesting thinking about where the future of innovation will go. But if we're sitting here in VR chat and in 10 years, VR basically just doesn't exist anymore. Like it was just kind of a failed experiment. Like you could say the same thing might happen with blockchain. Just a failed experiment. Yeah. Like that.
I think about that a lot, and I think it's more possible than a lot of people in the space like to admit. I think it could be a case where if Halo was released on Quest, it could change the trajectory and VR would be a thing forever. But like, what if someone just never develops the app that would get everyone? Like, it seems like it's part a tech issue, but it's part like a luck and cultural issue. And
that's really interesting.
It's kind of catching on, but I don't know. It just feels like there could be a future. AR feels a little bit more certain to me. And personally, I think VR, even if it like completely fails the vision that people have for it, I think it's going to be a permanent niche, would be my prediction.
Yeah, fair. That's a really interesting observation, though, that potentially it is more about the experiences built on top of the tech than it is about obviously the tech's important, but then it is about the tech for adoption. Like if you think about the iPhone, if there were a bunch of shitty apps on there, sure, I'm sure people would still use it, but the fact that Uber's on there, the fact that there's Google Maps, like all of that stuff contributes so much to adoption.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up the smartphone thing because I was literally thinking about that in the context of like technological progression. And there were smartphones and touchscreens before Apple, but I remember everyone was like, this sucks. I want physical keys. I don't want a touch screen. The experience isn't that interesting. And then Apple solved all these problems and marketed it in a creative way. But I feel like it's equally likely there could have been a future where someone came up with some sort of weird phone where maybe it's a smartphone, but it still has buttons and it still has all these other things. And we could all be using that right now. And it feels like sometimes in hindsight it's obvious, but it could have gone a lot of different ways. And I feel like we're in that right now for VR and blockchain where it could just completely crash and burn and not be a thing in the future. Or someone will come up with some really sleek, really nice improvement to either of them that makes them just the standard for how we use technology. I don't know.
This is such a fascinating concept. It is almost like you need this generation's or this tech generation's Apple or Steve Jobs or someone to just be so visionary. And you could even map it back like Henry Ford in the car. He had this great quote. It's one of my favorite quotes. He's like, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. Yeah. And it's just such a good example of you do sometimes need just that visionary who sees the future and just kind of makes an experience that makes it happen.
Yeah,
Of thing.
I think that's
I
why
don't know.
everyone's so hyped on Apple and the VR headset, because it's definitely going to be very different from any of the other headsets we've seen, especially on the software side. I think I'm extremely curious to see what that looks like. But yeah, I don't know. There just hasn't been a major difference in a lot of the headsets and the operating systems and platforms they run on. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, Apple could shake things up enough to alter the trajectory.
Yeah. Okay. Last question before I go on to mine, because like Apple was a new company when they pioneered this whole
Yeah.
thing, and now I wonder if it's just these incumbents are just it's just too hard to be totally innovative and disruptive because they have such set in stone processes. Are there any companies or projects that are in more startup phase that you're keeping an eye on that are,
Y-
I mean, kind of like Apple? I mean, I guess maybe Oculus would have been one, but then they were acquired by Meta.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of companies doing really niche hardware work, like focusing very specifically on lenses or focusing very specifically on XYZ feature. The issue is there's a really interesting Twitter thread. I forget who it was by, but he was making the point that this hardware, we've gone past the days where startups are going to make a meaningful difference because VR and AR are so intensely complicated and resource intensive that you have to be really niche, and then you'll probably just get acquired by one of the big dogs who kind of incorporates you into their vision of it. And I
Wow,
think Oculus was
that's
able to
fascinating.
do it because no one was trying really. Like, sure, some people were still interested, but there was like a hype cycle for VR back in the 90s, weirdly enough, and it was obviously awful and it died out immediately. And so everyone had kind of given up on it, but then you have a guy like Palmer Luckey who's just some nerd living in a trailer who's like putting together all these parts, and he's like, I think I can make a consumer affordable one. And he just had the advantage again of he had the time and he knew how to do it, and no one else was attempting to do it. So I don't
Okay,
know.
question on that thread because that is a super interesting take. If I responded to that with this person who made the thread is just a great example of an incumbent who is not thinking disruptive enough, and there will be someone like Palmer Luckey who comes in and does think and develop something totally groundbreaking, something totally disruptive that will counter what that thread is saying. Does that seem like a super unrealistic response, or what would your take be on that?
I mean, it's always possible. It's just the logistics of it all. It's so complicated. There's been a million headsets trying to do it different that come up on Kickstarter or all
Gotcha.
these different things, but they're not different enough and they don't fix enough of the issues we have with AR and VR. It's just a lot of the challenges of what we expect. So I guess maybe someone could come along and bring in something we don't expect that solves these issues, but a lot of the slimming down the headset and beefing up the components and doing all these things are these like really complex supply chain issues of, well, it's this expensive because there's not enough of the large tech companies buying them in bulk enough, so it needs to be like this massive large tech movement of moving just hundreds of thousands to millions of headsets in order to bring the price down, in order to downsize it. So yeah, I
Huh.
don't know. I
Very
don't know.
interesting.
Maybe I'm not thinking creatively enough either, but I think it's possible. But I just think most likely all the major headsets we're going to see for a while are from pretty established
Yeah.
companies.
Well, and that's why I was curious to hear your take because I don't really understand anything about what it takes to make these. So yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, I
Okay,
mean,
cool.
it's a lot
Well,
of it's beyond me too, but it seems like from what I understand, it's just colossally expensive and difficult to do. So
yeah.
yeah,
Huh. Well, as we always say, it will be fascinating to watch it all play out
it
from
will be.
beyond the headset. All right, I got. I'll get into my next segment. 10 minutes on the clock. All right, so we kind of talked about this last week, but hacks, security, Web3. struggles enormously right now, I think UX wise, with the security situation. And my piece of news here that ties into this is that do you know who Kevin Rose is?
That sounds really familiar.
He's a Web2 entrepreneur. He founded this thing called Dig. I don't know. I think it was like the pre-Reddit days.
Like DIGG?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm kind of familiar.
Okay, cool. I'm also not really, but he's done some cool stuff, I think. And so he's done some really cool stuff in the Web3 space too. He has this thing called Proof Collective, and then he released a PFP project called Moonbirds, which is one of the more prominent ones as well. But he got his wallet hacked like 2 days ago, and he lost 2 million of assets, and it was insane. And it's just like what we were talking about last week about how anyone can get their wallet hacked from someone like him who's such a prominent figure in the space. To lose like $2 million in art and just different assets is insane. And what happened was, I think it was some kind of phishing thing that we were talking about before, where he clicked on some link, a false link, seemed legit, made him sign a contract that essentially allowed him to sign over all of his assets of his wallet, or almost all of them. Some stayed, but it's such a UX problem right now. And there are some screenshots, I wish I could show them on this podcast, but of the signature that he signed. Basically, I don't know if you've done many Web3 transactions, but if you have MetaMask installed on your browser, basically you connect your wallet to something, and then MetaMask pops up as like a Chrome extension being like, sign or reject the transaction. And if you sign it, then it goes through. If you reject it, nothing happens. But when it says sign or reject, it has a little brief description of what the transaction is. And it's actually wild to see. There's screenshots of what he signed, and it's literally just a string of numbers and letters. Like, no one has any idea what they're signing. And so it's just like this it's up to fate to decide if you clicked on like a proper link or something. It's insane.
Yeah.
And so there are people developing these tools that do kind of, there's one that's now getting a lot of hype because of this Kevin Rose thing, and I think he might try to use it, where it explains the transaction. So it explains like, you are now signing over X amount of assets, or like this is going to be sent to that. So it explains it, but it's just still such a problem. And one of the guys from Bankless had a great tweet. I thought he was like, the UX of crypto is just so terrible. Imagine if you went to a store and every time you swiped your credit card, you ran the risk of losing all the money in your bank account. Yeah. And it's actually very accurate. I think that was such a good comparison to how it is right now. Every single time I sign a transaction, I'm nervous that everything's going to change. And there's things you can do like cold wallet experience, etc. But that just seems to continue to be one of the biggest issues, and will continue to be one of the biggest issues as we move forward, when people have real value and they're interacting like that. But like we said before, how do you really solve that? Is that just something that comes with decentralization, where you're not going to have this insurance that you have in a centralized world?
I don't know. That's crazy. So I am remembering, I do have MetaMask. I haven't like done any transactions really, but I have a friend who's building out a crypto blockchain app, and I was testing it, and I do remember it very much as when you sign it, it is so incomprehensible to me. It's the most baffling looking thing of all time, and I'm like, I easily could be scammed, but good thing I don't have anything in my wallet to take, so I'm fine. But I think that also is another one of those things that I don't want to invest in this space at all, because the risk is so high, and I don't want to be vigilant, because it seems like you really have to be like very eyes open, head on the swivel to avoid this kind of stuff. And I just don't want to put in that level of effort into it when I'm not
totally
100%. If it was much lower stakes, another thing is just how volatile it is. I'm too risk averse, but like if I thought it was a little less volatile and I didn't have to have my head on a swivel like that, why not? Why not just hop in and get involved? I don't know.
It's so interesting to hear you say that is one of the biggest potential barriers, because I totally agree. Recently, it seems like there's just been so many hacks. And for the first time ever, I think the past 2 days I've been having these thoughts of like, I almost want my wallet to just get drained so I don't have to stress about it anymore. Like, I don't actually want that, but like, it was for the first time ever. I was like, I'm now like, every time I go to bed, I'm like checking to make sure my wallet's not connected to different things. And like, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's getting so stressful. And like, there are some tools that help, but at the same time, it's like, you are living with this with this constant, I don't know, this constant stress of, will I click the wrong link? Will I accidentally do a phishing thing? Like, you do have to be so alert. And it's got me wondering if that's just going to be forever how it works. And I don't think so. I imagine with the pace of innovation,
I have
whatever,
to imagine no.
things will happen. But I'm kind of like, what will that solution be like? Because there are already solutions, but all of them still have issues. Like the Warm one I was talking about, you can delegate to different wallets. You still have to connect to Warm. And so in that way, it's like, what if Warm gets hacked? All my stuff gets taken. Even the Twitter verification. I disconnected my wallet from that because did I tell you? I told you, yeah, I freaked out about that glitch where the profile went circle. So I just disconnected my wallet from that. But now it's like, okay, I can't verify it. So like, you know, that was a cool thing to be able to verify that you own this asset to prove your ownership on Twitter. But you don't want to do that with your assets are worth so much. And
it sounds so stressful.
You know. Yeah,
I feel like our first guest on the show just needs to be like a therapist for you. You sound very worked up.
That's like what we need right now. It's just insane. And like, yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see how all of this, because it does seem like it's becoming more and more of a priority in the space. I think, like, I hate that
has
happened.
To be, I feel
Kevin
like.
Rose, it sucks. But when it happens to such a prominent figure like that, I hope it does accelerate more and more of the conversation on like, this is probably the single biggest issue right now. Because even if you onboard people through Flow or Polygon with your credit card, if they, and it's, dude, I literally almost clicked another spam. Like it's like, even me who's been in the space for 2 years or something, there's like there was actually a hilarious meme about this, because you see all of these fake accounts that try to replicate like who's the Ethereum founder? Vitalik. Like Vitalik, all these prominent figures, and in the replies of any prominent NFT project who tweets anything, there will be a reply from like Vitalik or the founder of the NFT project being like, mint live now, or like, don't miss out like 1 hour to claim your XYZ for this project. And they're all spam accounts, but the profile is the same. The Twitter username is literally typically like 1 letter difference. It's just like, they're all so similar, and it's so hard. I literally almost got excited and clicked one.
Oh god, yeah, dude. It is
just
tough.
happens.
I see that on YouTube a ton, not blockchain related, but like anytime, let's say Mr. Beast posts one of his videos, one of the top comments half the time is, "It's Mr. Beast," and he's like, "Okay, now we're doing a giveaway for XYZ things." And then all the comments are like, wait, what the fuck? This isn't a real giveaway? And it's like, it's because it's not actually Mr. Beast, obviously. But it's not obvious. I'm being unfair. A lot of the times it seems very legit. Like they'll switch out a J in the name for like a capital I or something. Just those like really close letters that you only notice if you're like very intensely looking at it. I don't know.
Yeah, totally. And when you get excited about a project, like if you loved Mr. Beast, you would click that link in a heartbeat. Like anytime Azuki tweets anything, I saw a funny tweet from someone I know from the Azuki community. He was like, if Azuki's Twitter, because their Twitters get hacked, a lot of projects' Twitters can get hacked, and then the project itself will post a spam link. And this guy was like, yo, if Azuki's Twitter ever got hacked, I would be drained in 2 seconds. Because whenever they tweet a link, I'm just like on it like a hawk, and it's the same for me. It's just like, it's scary. It is intense.
Yeah,
so
maybe everyone just needs to like make it a rule where you have to wait 1 day after the tweet before you click it.
Well, that's what I've been trying to do, and I like never respond to any Twitter DMs because you get people trying to do the like social scams all the time where they seem normal.
My Twitter DMs are actually make me hate NFTs and Web3 so much. They're so bad. I just have millions of these like fake ugly ass NFT projects that are like, come buy our NFT, and I'm like, stop.
Yeah. Okay, there was actually the hilarious one though, because it is pretty funny once you see all these and you can kind of meme it, but I think it was like the Senate of Puerto Rico's official Twitter or something random like that got hacked, and the new Twitter name was Zagabond.eth, which is the founder of Azuki, and then the profile picture was a doodle. So it was just like, even on a prominent account like that, when it gets hacked, the primary use is just to try to scam NFT projects. It's just absurd.
Yeah, it is a scary landscape out there for internet and web security.
It really is. Okay, that was my timer, but I guess just final thought is, as we were talking about this, it is really interesting. All these projects that are going towards bringing more Web 2 people over, like Flow and Polygon and stuff like that, that's awesome. But it does seem like actually the more important thing is let's build tools to help security. And I know these projects, that's not in their domain necessarily. Like they're not security projects, they're NFT brands, they're cultural brands. But it just feels like, yeah, there needs to be more happening there. Interesting. All right, what do you got?
This
Or
one
was that already 2 for you?
that was 2.
Oh, but you
We
got
can. Well, it can maybe be a quick one. I thought it was interesting.
Okay,
I thought
cool.
the last one
I
was
got
a
a
little.
few tidbits too.
Okay.
That I can bring up.
The last one was a little unfocused, but quick. Back to the Nintendo, the new Switch coming out. I don't know. Are you familiar with the Switch at all?
I have had one before, not recently though.
Nintendo Switch?
Yeah, because I think it was in our old office. We would have it and we would hook it up to the TV and
Yeah.
play Smash on it.
Well, well, I think I wanted to talk about A, that it's becoming one of the best selling consoles of all time, but B, just kind of thoughts of an alternate path for gaming and metaverse
yes.
stuff. And it is this like intense push to mobilize games, make them all mobile, because mobile games have been selling like hotcakes. But then all of a sudden the Switch comes out and it's a mobile thing that you just plug into a little stand you have on your TV, and then it becomes a TV console. And I think the demonstration of how well it's selling, in addition to the rise of cloud gaming, is kind of Microsoft's vision for what the future of gaming looks like. Not something you experience in glasses or a headset, but something where you have a very high level of processing power and you can play any game out there, but you can play it on your phone. You can play it in a car. You can play it on your laptop, your iPad. Maybe if you have glasses or a headset, you can play it in there. But I just think the success of the Nintendo and the focus of Microsoft is pointing to a very different direction for the future than what Meta thinks it is. And I think it's honestly more plausible in a lot of ways what they're pushing for. And so I'm really excited to see what the next Switch looks like. A lot of people think Nintendo's so interesting because they just do the weirdest things with all their consoles, and it sometimes flops. The Wii U was a complete flop for them.
What was the Wii U?
The Wii U was the predecessor to this, and it was like the Wii, but you had this little pad that had a screen on it, and you could touch it, and it would impact. So it looked kind of similar to what the Nintendo Switch looks like right now,
Gotcha.
but it did not sell. Like nobody wanted this thing, and there were great games on it, but it didn't matter. It was a complete flop for them, and they've turned it around since then. But I'm curious how wild they get with it in the next generation. Maybe it's just a performance boost for it, but I'd be interested to see, is there cloud gaming potential? They came up with this thing called Nintendo Labs, where it's a cardboard cutout thing, and you can put the headset in it, or you can put the Switch in it, and it becomes a VR headset. It's really bad, but like it's a fun, like $15 attachment to the Switch that turns it into a quote unquote VR headset.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I guess just
That is
interesting
What
directions.
PlayStation had one of those, right? Do they still?
Did it?
Like a handheld one? I remember there was some handheld device I had that I was obsessed with.
You're thinking, yeah, the console itself, the PSP. Yeah, I had that back in the day. Yeah, that thing was sweet.
What's going on with that? Does that still exist or no?
That's been dead for a while.
Why? Isn't it basically the same as the Switch?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they abandoned that one so fast. I think part of the issue was Nintendo has always dominated in the portable gaming space that isn't mobile gaming. So there was like probably the Nintendo DS out at that point, and that was just selling way more than the Sony. All their portable things sell way more. And I think Sony just kind of went back to their bread and butter, and what Sony's good at is their consoles are very high powered. In their gaming catalog, they have a lot of like really valuable IP that's exclusive to them. I have to imagine the success of the Switch has made them step back, but at the same time, with the advent of cloud gaming, do you need to make a Switch, or can you just create a cloud service and people can play it on their phones?
How do you feel about that? I mean, my initial reaction is you need a Switch because the phone would feel weird, but at the same time, I feel like if someone made a good experience on the phone, I would totally use it.
Well, I think there's a lot of really good games on the phones. I just hate the touchscreen component.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
No matter
That's
how
what I
good the
meant.
game is, I think that's why the Switch is so popular. Is it's basically like a large phone, but with controllers attached to it. However, there are for like iPhones now, you can get these attachments where you like Bluetooth link it to your phone and it attaches to your phone, and then you have like controllers on each side, and maybe if cloud gaming takes off, the popularity of those little phone attachments skyrockets with it, sort of thing.
Yeah, that is really interesting though about that vision. I like thinking about the alternatives. So in this way, in terms of the MMO stuff we were talking about, would this vision see that in your mind as on a mobile console, or does that MMO thing still have to be an immersive AR glasses, VR glasses situation?
I don't know. It kind of depends. Like you can already play MMOs on your phone, on whatever. I guess if you are looking for the metaverse, like everything is interconnected kind of thing, it feels like that would be much easier to do on a console or in the cloud or on a phone than on a headset, to be honest. Which is why I
Yeah.
think this is a very plausible thing that really limits VR and even AR in some cases to something that might just remain a niche or like a specific accessory you use for a few experiences. Like if a Halo
Yeah.
VR game came out, you throw on the headset for that. Otherwise, you're using your phone or you're just using your headset as like a screen to look at another screen in, essentially. Like how I said you can sit in a movie theater. And these
Yeah.
kind of trends make me lean more towards that a lot of the times.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. I mean, it seems like the data is pushing it, and it doesn't necessarily discount the idea that everything will continue to move more and more digital. It just makes it look a lot different. That's actually grounded in the data.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess the counter to that obviously would just be like, well, of course. I mean, that tech's just more built out, so the user experience is better. But when the AR tech is more built out with the headset, that will be better. But also maybe not. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I still kind of feel like a lot of what people think VR will become, and which would make VR so much more immersive and fun and a replacement for a cloud, a phone using the cloud or a Nintendo Switch. I'm just not convinced it's going to happen. It's just so complicated. It might happen, but it might be prohibitively expensive to. I don't know. It could just. That's
So
why
are
I think
you
it.
bearish on VR in the future? Is that what I'm?
Yeah,
Is
I've
that?
kind of always thought that VR it's going to remain.
Oh, but
It will.
AR is what you're.
AR, I'm a lot more
Gotcha,
bullish on.
gotcha.
VR, it could get way bigger, but I think even as big as it gets, it will be not as big as traditional 3D and 2D gaming that you do on like a flat screen in front of you.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, because with your developing, it's AR
Yeah. Yeah, the AR stuff
primarily.
seems like it's less of a burden on the user, which opens up the possibilities a lot more. And I also think
Yeah.
the creative opportunities, we haven't really seen too many breakout AR apps yet, outside of like less interesting stuff like a face filter on Snapchat. But I'm talking about like an
Yeah.
AR game or MMO. What would that look like? It would have to be pretty radically different from anything we've experienced before. And so that's why I'm so interested in the future of that is when people figure it out, I don't know, it could be something really game changing or not. I don't know.
Yeah. Cool, cool, cool. All right. Well, at the end here, do you want to just do like a few rapid fire tidbits? I have two, but I think
Yeah.
maybe I'll just talk about one. So this one is around. So you know how I was talking about Bored Ape Yacht Club last week about the sewer pass and this game, this skill based mint. So super interesting thing is happening here. So I was talking about how warm.xyz allows you to delegate to different wallets. So if you have a valuable asset in your cold wallet, you can delegate to a different wallet. So what that actually opened up is basically it's turning into like a pro gamer competition right now because what people are doing is if they have valuable assets or if they have one of these sewer passes, they're essentially paying professional gamers to get them a high score and delegating their asset to that gamer to use in the game. So the gamer doesn't own the asset, but they're allowed to play as the asset because the warm wallet is designating it to it. And so it's turning into this absolutely wild experience where,
That's hilarious.
you know how I was excited before about how it was skill and not pay to win? It's basically turning into pay to win. It's like, who has the most money to pay all these pro gamers? But there's been some really interesting conversation around it, because on the surface you might be like, oh, what the hell, like this is kind of, they're kind of taking advantage of it, it's kind of cheating. But the other take on that, which actually I would say almost over 50% of the people in the community are feeling, is that this is actually a really good thing, because it's in a sense onboarding all of these new gamers who are very legit into the Bored Ape Yacht Club ecosystem, even if it's not in necessarily they're getting their own NFTs, but they're playing this game, they're interacting in the experience, they're getting more awareness of what's going on. And it seems like Bored Ape's vision is to become more of this game-like experience. This was just the first one. They said this was kind of like proof of concept. And they have all this metaverse land with the other side. And so that, I think, is actually a really interesting take, that because of this ecosystem that they're basically creating a pro gamer tournament, there's so much awareness now in the gaming community of this. And maybe it's just in the way of like, oh, there's all these really rich people in the Bored Ape Yacht Club experience. If you're a pro gamer, come into this ecosystem because you can make a ton of money because they'll give it to you to bid. But at the same time, oh, you know, any press is good press in a sense, where you are spreading a lot of awareness into this other community. And so if Bored Ape is going more and more in the kind of the gaming type route, this might be maybe they were thinking about this ahead of time. I kind of doubt it. It seems like this could actually have been a very helpful byproduct of attracting a lot of the more Web2 gamers into this ecosystem moving forward. So it was just kind of an interesting byproduct of the whole thing.
How many people are doing this? Like, is it enough?
So there's 30,000 total passes, I believe. And I would say
that could be a lot.
Yeah, I mean, not that. I highly doubt 30,000 are doing it, but I would say, you know, 1,000, 2,000, etc. But yeah, it's just, it is interesting. It's basically just a pro gamer competition now with these like very, like, if you go to some of these Twitter profiles, because it's not. That's kind of the cool thing. It's not really frowned upon. It's not really under the table. It's now you have gamers, like a gamer slid in my DMs yesterday, being like, "Hey, if you need help with your pass, like I'm here to do it." So it's pretty funny. So hopefully that does expand some of that ecosystem.
I'm something of a gamer myself. If you need some,
yeah, I know.
Need some
Dude, I was low key thinking about hitting you up about it, and now that I know that,
no, I'm not actually good at gaming. I remember back in the Halo 3 days, I wasn't good, so I just thought it was funny to shoot my teammates
and hide around.
Yeah, basically.
But yeah, so okay, that's my tidbit, which is kind of interesting. Anything else you got?
No, that's all I got. Next tidbit.
Okay.
Please.
Then I'll just do one. I'll just do one last tidbit because I think it was funny and it relates to what we were doing before. So you know how I was talking about mainstream brands entering into the NFT space in a cringe way. So we had one of those happen this week with Porsche.
I love cringe.
So
Gimme it.
So Porsche tried to enter the Web3 space, and it was fascinating because it's something like Porsche 911 Club or something like that, but their mint price was 0.9 ETH, and ETH is like 1,600 right now or something, so it was a solid amount of money. And so in basically every single NFT community, this is a fascinating case study in what we were talking about before about entering in organically and authentically versus inorganically and inauthentically. And any Web3 group you were in talked about how that price was way too high, and what they should do is do a 0.091 mint. And this was before it actually minted. It was just when they announced what it was, because the whole ethos with Web3 is bring people in, build your community from there, add more value than you extract. And this was the narrative before they even minted. Then the mint goes live at 0.9. And I think they only sold like 10%. So it was like they minted like 1,000 of these and there were 9,000 left over. But it was just a fascinating case study of literally everyone who's in Web3 being absolutely correct about what would happen. And I have to finish the story though, because Porsche did end up cutting their supply. They were like, okay, we've only minted this much. We're just going to cut it here. We're not even going to have all the 9,000. So then they were turned into a bunch of FOMO. And so now the price is actually like 3 ETH. Or I think it actually went down to like 2. So yeah, it did have this moon. My theory on that though is it's just like the classic Web3 FOMO, where if anything happens, people just like want to get into it and whatever.
Any news is good news.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that will die down and like it will go back because it doesn't seem like there's a ton of utility, but it was just the classic case of everyone in the Web3 community kind of understanding what was going to happen, and it didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
So
That happens a lot. I feel like there's a lot of these scenarios where companies try and do something and people who are core to the community, before they do it, are like, hey, don't do that because it's not going to work well.
yeah,
And they just don't do it. And then that's just kind of a red flag to everyone. Like, this wasn't authentic. They don't actually know
exactly.
why we
And
do
it just
this. They just...
comes off as cash grab.
Yeah.
But you got to imagine like with these big brands, like, are they that clueless, or is it actually just hard to understand? Like that's what I don't get. Like they've got to have people who they contract out or who are on their team who are like their Web3 division or something.
Mm-hmm.
And like, are those people just completely clueless, or like, I don't know. It's just
Well,
so
it could
interesting when a
be
brand like
even
Porsche-
the people managing them are maybe the person who's in charge of the project understood it, but the person managing was like, no, we're not greenlighting this unless you make this much money. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
I guess we have to just juice up the price.
That's actually so fair.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, potentially. But yeah, I mean, solid week this week. Solid
Great
stuff.
week.
Solid stuff. Yeah, good stuff. Should we wrap it up for the day?
I think so. I don't got anything else. You're
Nice.
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in. I think we're at millions of fans now. So the
Yeah, it's
millions of
definitely
you,
up there.
thanks
It's definitely up there.
for tuning in and supporting us. It means a lot.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, we'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Catch us on TikTok, Spotify, not quite Apple Podcasts yet, but soon, hopefully. Yeah, we'll catch you next time.
Peace.
Peace.